If you collect import figures, you're going to wind up having a whole bunch of different stand bases taking up space in your display area. That's why I created the MiniBases, so that you could keep everything stable and secure, but also save a lot of space so you could display more of your collection. I listened to your guys' feedback on the MiniBases, and most of what I was hearing was that you guys wanted to see me add support for more stands, namely Revoltech, Abitsu, and Mafex. Now that's fine, but I really don't want to wind up in a position where I'm trying to sell you guys like 6 different MiniBases. That's just going to wind up being more expensive for you and confusing for everyone involved. So I decided to just make one. This is the UniBase. It's marginally larger than the Type 1 MiniBase was, but it has 4 sockets that can support 6 different common stand arms: Tamashii, Revoltech, Abitsu, Figma, Nendoroid, and Mafex. It turns out that the Mafex stands actually have the same peg and socket size as the GSC stuff, which means that the Type 2 MiniBases had Mafex support all along. Here we have the 6 different brands of stand arms. Obviously they're not all identical, they all have different sizes of pegs and different lengths of pegs. Now, in order to accommodate all of these, I needed to make the UniBase thicker than the Type 1 MiniBases were. The only one of the stands that wound up being a real issue was the Abitsu stand. It has a ludicrously long peg on it, and it just stuck up way too high and wasn't stable enough. So I had to develop a spacer ring that will come with every UniBase, that you slide onto the Abitsu peg, and then will work in conjunction with the UniBase to allow it to be stable and secure just like the others. You will probably notice that some of the stands that it supports still have a peg that is longer than the UniBase is thick, not just the Abitsu stand. For every one of the stand arms that is not an Abitsu stand, this wound up not being an issue. The sockets on the UniBase have a nice tapered design and will have a solid, firm grip well before you would need to push them all the way through the UniBase and out the bottom. Stability-wise, the UniBases are excellent. I did the same testing I did with the Type 1 MiniBases, so I started with a standing pose Figuarts figure, Kinnikuman, the same one I did for those. He didn't fall over until he physically traveled all the way to the edge of the test platform from the shaking and moved off of the test platform, which means that he didn't fall over at all with the base during the shaking. I decided to go a little bit more extreme with it, so I took a rather beefy figure, the Revoltech Venom, and I put him in an aerial pose, which are less stable than the standing ones with these. And that still withstood a decent bit of shaking. The bottom line of the stability testing is that these absolutely do their job. They provide good stability while still being significantly smaller than the bases that they replace. You don't need to buy 6 different bases to do this, you just need one. The UniBase will be available for pre-orders starting on Friday, March 16th, 2018 at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on CanofBeams.com. There is one last thing I'd like to talk about with the UniBases and MiniBases in general, and that is the existence of some irregular variances in some of the certain pack-in releases of the stage arms that are produced by Bandai and GSC. Bandai in particular is the bigger issue here. Some of the ones that they've released packed in with certain sets, like the St. Cloth Myth EX set or the Sailor Moon Figuarts, actually have different dimensions to the base pegs that go with the Tamashii stage arms that come with them. They either have a longer peg that is slightly thicker or a regular length peg that is much thicker than a typical stage arm has from them. These pack-ins that are irregular are rather rare, but it's very easy if you have one to get it mixed in with all of your other stage arms because you're not really measuring those. The variance isn't typically obvious at first glance. If you line them all up next to each other, it becomes much more obvious, but when you just have a bunch of stand arms, it's easy to get them mixed in there. So what's been happening is some people have been discovering some of these amongst their collections, and when they go to use them in a mini base, they find that it's much harder to put it into the base, and they wind up forcing it, and it will shatter the mini base. Now, the ones that have a longer base peg, those are a bit more insidious, because they're only a little bit thicker, so you can kind of get it in there. It's a little bit harder to get it in there. But then, because it is bigger than it's used to, it does run the risk of cracking the mini base. So, generally the rule of thumb on these is going to be, if it's a little bit harder to get into a regular, basic, clear Tamashii Stage Act 4 base, don't try to put it in a mini base. If you have to force it, don't put it in the mini base. If it has a longer base peg, do not put it in the mini base. Figma's problem is more random. For example, the Metroid Prime 3 Samus. The stand arm that she comes with is a little bit thinner than all of the other Figma stand arms that I have seen ever. So that one will not fit in the Unibase. There's nothing I can really do about that. But those ones are more rare, so I don't anticipate people running into those as often. There are a couple Nendoroids that have some variants, but most of those are either very old ones or very strange one-offs where for some reason it wasn't quite the right size. So I haven't pegged down all of the different variants, but I do want people to be aware that there are irregular stand arms that do exist from some of these companies. So be careful. If it feels like you're forcing something, you are forcing something, and you shouldn't be doing that. So be careful. If you do identify an irregular one that you think came from a set that I'm unaware of, please let me know, because I'd love to catalog all of them just for reference.